The chief executive of British bank Barclays, Bob Diamond, has resigned. It's less than a week since the bank was fined a record amount for trying to manipulate interbank lending rates. Chris Roebuck is visiting professor at Cass Business School in London. He's also worked at several international banks, including UBS, and joins us from London now. Good to have you with us, Chris. This resignation was said to be a decision taken between Diamond and the Barclays board. Given the amount of pressure on the bank, it does seem fairly inevitable that this would happen, doesn't it?
It seems fairly inevitable to the degree if there had been some element of clear culpability that potentially further down the line he should have gone. Whether it's a good thing for Barclays to actually have your chairman go on Monday and your chief executive go on Tuesday, that's questionable, because I suspect that there is a certain amount of worry between shareholders and employees about what's going to happen over the next few weeks.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, what about the fact that he's due to appear before the parliamentary committee tomorrow? There's some suggestion that he could make some embarrassing revelations now that he's not CEO anymore.
Well, I think you're absolutely right there, because, you know, he can say what he likes now, and I think, knowing Bob Diamond, he might well do. I mean, one of the unfortunate things that seems to have been coming from the politicians in UK is they constantly talk about a culture of unethical behaviour in banking. Let's be absolutely clear. What we're talking about here is we're talking about probably a couple of hundred people maximum over 20 global banks across the entire world that knew anything about this. And certainly there are people who work in banking in UK who are pretty upset that politicians keep saying that particular statement. These people, hundreds of thousands of people, work in banking day in, day out with utter integrity, utter professionalism and totally ethically for customers on the high street. And it's a bit unfortunate that politicians tend to give the impression that British banking per se is unethical.
But this is the problem, isn't it? There is now a lack of trust in banks and in the city and in the kind of practices that people assume that banks are carrying on behind their backs without, you know, any kind of punishment. Do you think a parliamentary inquiry is enough to restore trust? Do you want to see something stronger? Do you want to see an independent inquiry?
Well, I think we have to distinguish here between what the public thinks and what the politicians and media think. For the average British person on the street, it's the same as any other country. As long as you can go to your local bank and you think the bank manager is looking after you and you're getting the service you need, you actually trust your bank. Now, the people who might be in the investment bank, when you hear stories about them, after the financial crisis, most British people, like people around the world, say, oh, that's investment bankers for you. But the politicians here certainly have got the bit between their teeth in terms of wanting to get into the banks and to basically bash the bankers to get them to try and stop scandals. But you're not going to stop scandals completely. If you think that each major bank employs at least 100 to 150,000 people, statistically, as one chief risk officer of a bank said to me, someone somewhere in my bank, somewhere in the world, must be doing something wrong.
OK, well, I for one will be interested to see what kind of severance pay Diamond gets. Chris, thanks very much indeed for that. Chris Roebuck in London there. Women in Egypt are building on the revolution to call a halt to sexual harassment.